I never thought I'd be writing this, but I need to get it off my chest. My stepmom Belinda, 48F, married my dad, 55M, 3 years ago when he was diagnosed with cancer, and now that he's gone, she's showing her true colors. I, 28F, and my brother Jake, 25M, always knew something was off about her, but we kept quiet for Dad's sake. Now I wish we had spoken up sooner. Let me start from the beginning. Our mom passed away 5 years ago from a car accident. It destroyed our family. Dad took it especially hard. They had been high school sweethearts, married for 30 years. They were the kind of couple everyone wanted to be, still holding hands and having date nights even after all those years. When Mom died, it was like all the light went out of Dad's life. He stopped going to work, barely ate, and spent most days just sitting in Mom's garden, staring at nothing. Jake and I tried everything to help him. We took turns staying at the house, making sure he ate and took care of himself. I even moved back home temporarily, putting my career on hold. We suggested grief counseling, and that's where everything went wrong. That's where he met Belinda. Belinda was also attending the grief support group, claiming to be a widow herself. We later found out this was a lie. She was divorced, not widowed. She zeroed in on Dad from day one. Looking back, I can see how calculated it all was. She always sat next to him, always had tissues ready when he got emotional, always touched his arm while talking. Within a month, she was bringing him homemade meals and checking in multiple times a day. Dad started talking about her constantly. Belinda said this, Belinda suggested that. Before we knew it, she was coming to family dinners. She brought her son Neville, 22M, along, playing the perfect little family. At first, we were just happy to see Dad smiling again. But something felt off. The red flags started small. Belinda would rearrange things in the house without asking, claiming she was helping organize. But she was really erasing Mom's presence. Family photos disappeared into boxes. Mom's cookbooks vanished from the kitchen. Her garden, which Dad had maintained religiously after her death, was suddenly being torn up for modernization. When Belinda moved in 6 months after meeting Dad, things got worse. She took over the master bedroom immediately, packing up Mom's remaining clothes and jewelry without even asking us if we wanted to keep anything. When I confronted her, she gave me this sickeningly sweet smile and said, "Sweetie, don't you think it's time to let go? Your mother would want us to move forward." Her son Neville was no better. He treated our family home like a hotel, leaving messes everywhere, and taking over the garage with his gaming setup. He even had the nerve to ask Dad to help pay for his college, despite having just met him. Dad, being the kind person he was, actually considered it. I started noticing money issues too. Dad's credit card bills suddenly doubled. Belinda always had some explanation: household expenses, repairs, things for their future. She convinced Dad to buy her a new car because they needed to start their life together properly. Meanwhile, she was too busy to visit him when he started chemo. The real kicker came when Dad got his cancer diagnosis. Instead of being supportive, Belinda used it as leverage. She pushed for marriage immediately, saying things like, "I want to take care of you properly and we need to think about the future." She even planned the entire wedding herself, a lavish affair that Dad was too sick to really enjoy. None of his family was involved in the planning. She didn't even ask us to help. After the wedding, Belinda's control grew worse. She started screening Dad's phone calls, claiming he needed rest. Family members who had known us for decades suddenly couldn't get through to him. She controlled his medication, his doctor appointments, everything. When Jake tried to take Dad to chemotherapy one day, Belinda threw a fit, saying only she could handle his medical care. Dad's dog Max was her next target. Max was a 12-year-old golden retriever, the sweetest dog you'd ever meet. Mom had rescued him as a puppy, and he was Dad's last connection to her. Belinda started complaining about his smell, his fur, his neediness. She put his bed in the garage, saying he was too disruptive in the house. Poor Max was devastated, and Dad was too weak to argue. The breaking point came when I found Belinda going through Dad's office late one night. I had stopped by to drop off some soup, using my key to let myself in quietly. She was rifling through his desk drawers, photographing documents with her phone. When I confronted her, she claimed she was organizing his papers, but I saw her shoving something into her purse. That's when I started paying closer attention. I noticed her taking lengthy phone calls in the garden, speaking in hushed tones. She was always texting, but would quickly hide her phone if anyone came near. Then my cousin Amy called with the bombshell. She had seen Belinda and Uncle Mike, Dad's younger brother, having an intimate dinner at a restaurant 50 miles from town. I started documenting everything. The missing medications, the suspicious phone calls, the coincidental meetings with Uncle Mike. Belinda must have noticed because she suddenly became overly nice to me, constantly inviting me over and asking for daughter-daughter bonding time. It made my skin crawl. Dad passed away last week and Belinda's act dropped completely. She barely cried at the funeral, spent most of the time on her phone, and rushed through the service. The next day, she called a family meeting to discuss the estate. She and Uncle Mike sat there, acting like they owned everything, talking about selling the house and liquidating Dad's business. What they don't know is that Dad wasn't as naive as they thought. After Mom died, he made sure Jake and I would be protected. Everything, the house, the business, all assets, was transferred to our names years ago. He had seen friend lose everything to second marriages and wasn't about to let that happen to us. Now Belinda's threatening legal action, claiming Dad was manipulated into cutting her out. She's got Uncle Mike backing her up, probably because she promised him a cut. But we have all the documentation, and we're not backing down. This house, Dad's legacy, everything, it stays in the family, just like Dad wanted. I know this is long, but I needed to get it out. Belinda can threaten all she wants, but she's not getting a penny of what she doesn't deserve. Update 1: Things have gotten so much worse since my last post. Belinda's true colors are really showing now, and it's even uglier than I imagined. She's still living in the house, claiming she needs time to process her grief, but really she's just trying to take everything she can get her hands on. Every day brings a new drama, and I'm honestly exhausted from dealing with all of it. The day after the funeral, Belinda started going through Dad's things like a vulture. She didn't even wait 24 hours before she was rummaging through his closet, claiming she was organizing his belongings for donation. Jake and I were in the kitchen when we heard her upstairs, opening drawers and moving furniture around. When we went to check, we found her stuffing Dad's expensive watches into her purse. She claimed Dad had promised them to her, but we knew better. Those watches were family heirlooms, one had belonged to our grandfather, and Dad had always said they would go to Jake. The real shock came when Jake caught her trying to break into the safe in Dad's study. Mom's jewelry collection was in there, pieces that had been in her family for generations. Belinda didn't know we had changed the combination after Dad went into hospice. He had insisted on it, saying he didn't trust her. When Jake walked in, she was kneeling in front of the safe with a piece of paper full of number combinations. She jumped up, claiming she was just cleaning, but we could see the panic in her eyes. We thought that was bad, but it got worse. Last week, I got a call from Thomas, a local realtor. He was confused about some details regarding the house listing. At first, I had no idea what he was talking about. We hadn't listed the house for sale. Turns out Belinda had contacted several real estate agents, claiming to be the property owner. She had even forged documents showing she had power of attorney over Dad's estate. Thomas sent me copies of everything, and I was floored. She had planned to sell the house right from under us. The documents she forged were pretty sophisticated too. She must have been planning this for a while because she had fake property deeds, altered bank statements, everything. The realtor said she was pushing for a quick sale, claiming she needed to settle the estate quickly. She had even scheduled open houses for next week. But here's where it gets really twisted. My cousin Amy started doing some digging, and she found out Belinda and Uncle Mike had been seeing each other way before Dad died. They weren't even trying to be subtle about it. Several people in town had seen them together at restaurants, movie theaters, even shopping for furniture. Amy found social media posts from months ago showing them at a beach resort 3 hours away. In some of the photos, Belinda wasn't wearing her wedding ring. When we confronted Uncle Mike about it, he tried to play it off as supporting a grieving family member. But then Belinda slipped up. She didn't know I was in the house when Uncle Mike came over yesterday. I overheard them in the kitchen, talking about their plans. Belinda was angry because things weren't going as smoothly as they'd hoped. She kept saying things like, "We need to move faster, and once we sell this place, we can start over." I recorded part of their conversation on my phone. They were discussing how to contest the property transfer, with Uncle Mike suggesting they claimed Dad wasn't mentally competent when he signed everything over to us. Belinda even laughed about how easy it would be to get Dad's old doctor to say the cancer had affected his judgment early on. It made me sick to my stomach. The next day, Jake found even more evidence of their relationship. He was clearing out Dad's home office when he found a folder of emails that Dad had printed out. Apparently, someone had anonymously sent him screenshots of conversations between Belinda and Uncle Mike, dating back almost a year. The emails were full of their plans for after Dad's death, looking at houses in Florida, discussing how to handle the estate sale, even joking about how convenient Dad's illness was for their timeline. Dad must have known about their affair but chose to keep quiet about it. We decided enough was enough and had our lawyer draw up formal eviction papers. When we presented them to Belinda, she put on the performance of a lifetime. She collapsed into tears, wailing about how we were destroying the family. She called everyone she could think of, aunts, uncles, family friends, telling them we were throwing a grieving widow out on the street. Some people actually fell for it. Aunt Linda called me, screaming about how heartless we were being. But Belinda's son Neville finally came through for us. He had been quiet through all of this, staying in his room and avoiding everyone. But when he saw Belinda's meltdown over the eviction, something in him snapped. He started yelling at her right there in front of everyone, calling her a liar and a gold digger. He revealed that this wasn't the first time she had done something like this. She had targeted other wealthy men before Dad, always looking for a big payout. The best evidence came from Dad's old laptop. Jake was going through it and found a hidden folder of security camera footage. Turns out Dad had installed cameras in his study after noticing things going missing. The video showed Belinda and Uncle Mike meeting there multiple times while Dad was in hospice. In one particularly damning clip, Belinda is showing Uncle Mike where Dad kept his important papers, joking about how they'd need those soon. We immediately turned everything over to our lawyer, the forged documents, the recordings, the security footage, everything. Copies went to every family member who had been defending Belinda. The support for her dried up real fast after that. Even Aunt Linda called back to apologize. Now Belinda's desperately trying to salvage her reputation, but it's too late. Everyone knows the truth about her and Uncle Mike. Her own son won't even speak to her anymore. He moved out yesterday, saying he couldn't stand to look at her. She's still in the house for now, but not for long. Our lawyer says the eviction should be finalized by next week. I'll update again when we finally get her out. For now, I'm just trying to document everything in case she tries anything else. Dad might have known about her betrayal, but he didn't get to see her face justice. We're making sure that happens now. Update 2: just when I thought things couldn't get messier, Belinda and Uncle Mike decided to take their fight to court. They filed a lawsuit claiming the property transfer was invalid, arguing that Dad's illness had affected his mental state years before his actual diagnosis. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, but they actually found doctors willing to testify about how cancer can affect decision-making even in early stages. Their lawyer tried to paint this picture of Dad as this confused, easily manipulated man who didn't know what he was doing when he transferred the property to us. They even brought in Dad's former golf buddies to testify about how he had changed after Mom died, suggesting he wasn't in his right mind. It was infuriating to sit there and listen to them twist everything around. But their whole case fell apart when we started presenting our evidence. First, we had documentation showing Dad had consulted with 3 different lawyers before making the property transfer. He had everything evaluated, documented, and properly filed. The judge was particularly interested in the letters Dad had written explaining his reasons for the transfer, specifically mentioning how he wanted to protect his children's inheritance. The real bombshell came during the second week of court proceedings. One of the hospice nurses, Linda, came forward with detailed records of missing medications. She had been keeping a private log of Dad's pain medication, noting how the numbers never added up during Belinda's visits. Linda had reported it to her supervisors, but Belinda always had excuses. Pills fell down the drain, bottles got knocked over, Dad needed extra doses. We hired a private investigator who tracked down some of Belinda's past. Turns out she had quite a history that she'd managed to keep hidden. She had been married 3 times before Dad, each time to wealthy older men. 2 had died under suspicious circumstances, and 1 had divorced her after catching her stealing from him. She had managed to keep most of this quiet by changing her name slightly each time and moving to different states. The investigator also found evidence of Belinda selling prescription medications. She had been taking Dad's pain meds and selling them through some network of dealers. The police are now investigating that separately, and she might be facing criminal charges. But the biggest surprise came from Neville, Belinda's son. He finally broke down and told us everything. He had known about his mother's plans from the beginning because she had done this before. She specifically joined grief support groups looking for vulnerable wealthy men. She had actually been attending 3 different groups in the area when she met Dad. Neville showed us text messages where Belinda bragged about how easy it was to manipulate Dad. She called him her retirement plan and joked about how quickly she could sell everything once he was gone. She had even researched property values and tax records before approaching him, calculating exactly how much she could get from his estate. The messages between Belinda and Uncle Mike were even worse. They had been planning their future together while Dad was still fighting for his life. They had already picked out a house in Florida and were discussing how to handle the money from selling Dad's property. Uncle Mike had even started moving some of his things into a storage unit, preparing to leave his wife. When confronted with all this evidence in court, Uncle Mike tried to save himself by turning on Belinda. He claimed she had manipulated him, just like she had manipulated Dad. He broke down on the stand, admitting their affair had started even before Dad's diagnosis. He said Belinda had convinced him that Dad was going to leave everything to her anyway, so they might as well plan their future. The judge was absolutely disgusted. Not only did he dismiss their lawsuit, but he also ordered a full investigation into Belinda's past activities. He ordered Belinda to return everything she had taken from the house: jewelry, watches, documents, everything. She had already sold some of Mom's jewelry, but the judge ordered her to either recover the pieces or pay us their appraised value. The family has completely turned against them now. Uncle Mike's wife kicked him out and is filing for divorce. Most of our relatives won't even speak to either of them. Belinda's reputation in town is completely destroyed. Apparently, she can't even get a hair appointment because no one wants to serve her. The best part? The judge ordered Belinda and Uncle Mike to pay all our legal fees. Their little scheme ended up costing them everything they were trying to steal from us. Dad would have loved the irony of that. We're finally getting our house back now, piece by piece. Belinda has to be supervised while she retrieves her belongings, and she's not allowed to take anything that wasn't explicitly given to her. It's satisfying watching her pack up her stuff under the watchful eye of our lawyer and a police officer. I'll update again once everything is finalized, but for now, it feels good to know that justice is being served. Dad and Mom would be proud. Update 3. This is probably going to be my final update on the whole Belinda situation. Everything finally came to a head, and the ending was even more dramatic than I expected. After losing in court, Belinda and Uncle Mike tried one last desperate move that completely backfired on them. They went to local media outlets with this sob story about how 2 greedy children had stolen their father's estate from his grieving widow. Belinda gave tearful interviews about how she had devoted her life to caring for Dad during his illness, and how we had manipulated him into cutting her out of his will. She even claimed that Dad had verbally promised her the house and business. Uncle Mike backed up her story, saying Dad had confided in him about wanting to take care of Belinda. But they didn't count on journalists actually doing their job. One reporter started digging into Belinda's background, and what he found was shocking even to us. Not only had she been married multiple times before Dad, but she had also been investigated for elder abuse in 2 different states. She had managed to avoid charges by leaving town before investigations could be completed. The reporter found her previous victims' families. One man's daughter came forward with a story almost identical to ours, how Belinda had joined a grief support group, targeted her recently widowed father, and tried to claim his estate after his death. Another family revealed that Belinda had actually worked as a hospice nurse years ago but lost her license for stealing patients' medications. When the story broke, it was like watching dominoes fall. Uncle Mike immediately distanced himself from Belinda, probably hoping to salvage what was left of his reputation. He gave a separate interview claiming Belinda had manipulated him too, playing the victim card. His wife wasn't buying it though. She went on social media and exposed all his lies, including evidence that he had been planning to leave her for Belinda over a year ago. Belinda's response to being exposed was exactly what you'd expect from someone like her. She tried to destroy everything she couldn't have. Last week, our security cameras caught her trying to break into the house at 3 a.m. She had cans of paint and some kind of acid with her. The police arrived before she could do any damage, and now she's facing criminal charges for attempted vandalism. But the most satisfying part came from an unexpected source, her son Neville. He finally found the courage to tell his whole story to the police. Turns out he had documentation of Belinda's schemes going back years, including recordings of her bragging about how she targeted wealthy widowers. He had kept quiet out of fear and guilt, but watching her try to destroy our family finally pushed him to act. The criminal investigation into Belinda's past is ongoing. They're looking into the suspicious deaths of her previous husbands, the missing medications, everything. She's facing potential charges in 3 different states. Uncle Mike isn't doing much better. He's living in a cheap motel since his wife kicked him out, and he lost his job when his employer learned about his role in everything. Jake and I are finally getting our lives back to normal. We're renovating the house, erasing all traces of Belinda's presence. Mom's photos are back on the walls, her garden is being restored, and Max is home where he belongs. He's old now, but he still wags his tail every time he passes Mom's picture in the hallway. We found Dad's journal last week while cleaning out his study. In it, he wrote about knowing what Belinda and Uncle Mike were up to, but choosing to stay quiet to protect us. He knew that if he confronted them, they might try to challenge the property transfer. He played along to make sure everything stayed in our names, sacrificing his own happiness to secure our future. Sometimes I feel guilty for not seeing through Belinda's act sooner, for not protecting Dad better. But then I remember what he wrote in his journal: my children are stronger than they know. They'll handle whatever comes their way. He was right about that. Belinda and Uncle Mike are out of our lives for good now. The house stayed in the family, just like Dad wanted. Sometimes justice takes its time, but it gets there in the end.